Well, here's someone who knows a thing or two about the Greece Eurozone situation. Joining us from Strasbourg is Siegfried Muresan. He is a member of the European Parliament, but also a member of the Budget Committee, which is why we want to talk to you about Greece, Siegfried. Let's start with a bit of myth-busting, though. Greece isn't going to leave the Eurozone, is it? I mean, this idea seems to have been pushed by analysts and speculators in the media, but I mean, really, how real is the actual threat of Greece leaving the Eurozone?
Absolutely not, and I say that with all responsibility, based on a couple of facts. So firstly, we always got it right concerning all of the EU member states, all of the member states of the Eurozone which were in economic difficulty. The Eurozone was there to help them, and at the end of the day, they all got out of trouble. Ireland has shown it, Portugal has shown it, and in Greece, yes, it took a bit longer. It might have been a bit harder, but we're also there to help. So my message to the skeptics is don't have too high hopes. We got it right last time in Greece. Last parliamentary elections, 2012, were difficult. These ones, yes, they also look difficult for the pro-European forces, but we will get it right, and Greece will stay in the Eurozone. This is my message to people around the world, to investors, to everyone who cares about Greece.
But the problem with Greece, Siegfried, is that it's still got a huge amount of debt, it's got political instability, it's got a party which is likely to win the next election and wants to write off debt. Does that not present a whole lot of problems?
Yes, you are saying a long series of very important things. So firstly, of course, it's political instability. Greece was on the right track with the current government. Not everything was perfect with the current government, but they basically managed to reduce their deficit. They even got to a primary surplus, with a primary budgetary surplus, which is quite remarkable. So efforts were made. Greece was on the right track, 2012, 2013. It got again into trouble when political instability occurred, because what's important in Greece is to regain competitiveness, to privatize its economy, to stay attractive for investors. But if the country is politically unstable, then of course investors around the world would ask themselves 3 times before going again into that country. So most of its current problems, I would say, are due to political instability. Shall we manage to overcome this? It's of course a good thing, but you are also right. The huge amounts of debt, and also to repay that, Greece needs to return to growth. For that, of course, it needs exports. It needs to regain competitiveness. Economic structural reforms are key, are essential. So that's it. But of course, what the party, and this was also an important point which you made, what the party which is currently leading in the polls, which is the extreme left, is proposing is writing Greece's debt off, hiring more people into the public sector and so on. Hiring more people into the public sector, not reforming the economy, not making Greece competitive. It's exactly the recipe which led Greece into the crisis. So to those who tend to trust the extreme left, the message is clear. They would basically apply exactly the measures which led Greece into the crisis. And secondly, if they want to write Greece's debt off in the form of a bankruptcy, would you, as a foreign investor, trust Greece again? So no, that is to me a no-go, what the extreme left is proposing in terms of economic utopia, both on the fiscal budgetary debt side and on the real economy side.
But what about the idea that the rest of Europe and the rest of the world maybe should give Greece a break here? You know, a lot of people point to post-war Germany and the way that back in 1953 a lot of its debt was forgiven, and, you know, look at where Germany is now. Why not treat this as almost a time of war for Greece, where its economy has been decimated? Give it a break.
Yeah, so of course, Greece already received a break, so part of its debt was rescheduled, longer term and so on. This is something which I can imagine doing again right now, rescheduling Greece's debt, making it even longer term. But you have to assure yourself that Greece has the capacity to repay its debt, and the only way to that is competitive. And when you were giving the example of Germany, you are right, because they were building a very competitive economy in Germany in the 50s, in the 60s. It was the German economic miracle, we all know it. So you know, writing Greece's debt off, but keeping its inefficient economic structures of the past, at the end of the day, would return Greece into the same trouble into a couple of years. Most of the hard decisions, by the way, I think were made. The people have made sacrifices. the bigger trouble is already behind them. That's why I think, the sacrifices made by the people shouldn't be jeopardized now by irresponsible economic decisions. We should keep the country on the same track. Structural economic reforms, reduce expenditure. And by the way, this is, I think, one point where the government, there was central-right government, for which I have sympathies, was wrong. I think, when your deficit is too high, you have two ways to reducing it. Either you increase your revenues or you decrease your expenditures. I think the government should have done more on cutting expenditures, public expenditures which basically do not lead to growth, do not lead to jobs. The people do not benefit from them. I think the government should have done more on cutting expenditures and maybe less on increasing the burden on the middle class, on SMEs, on investors.
Just finally, Secretary, I'd like a thought from you on the wider Eurozone. It looks like we're finally starting to head down this road of quantitative easing via the European Central Bank. I just want your thoughts on that and whether the amount of quantitative easing you think will actually be adequate.
Look, I think the European Central Bank has done pretty much over the past years, given also its mandate. And we in the international world, in the international media, always compare the European Central Bank with the Fed, with the Bank of England. But of course, the mandate of the European Central Bank is very much different than the mandate of the Fed in the US. So we should never expect the same from the European Central Bank that we expect from the Fed. And given the limits of its mandate, I think the ECB has done pretty much. I think the responsibility over the past years, I think the responsibility lies mainly with the governments now. It's their obligation to pursue with economic reforms, with structural reforms. And when I mean structural reforms, I'm also including fiscal reforms, because when I think about fiscal reforms, I think, the budget should be done in line with priorities. So you should reallocate. You should not just bluntly cut without thinking too much of it. No, you should reallocate the resources in a way in which it helps the economy, it makes the economy stronger, it helps it regain competitiveness. So I think the ECB has already done pretty much. I think most of the responsibility now lies with the governments in the Eurozone.
Siegfried Muresan, it's been a pleasure talking to you today on Counting the Cost. Thank you for your time.